Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to the studio. And today I want to talk about how to give your protagonist, especially, good flaws. And what do I mean by good flaws? Those are the flaws that make your character human and make them relatable to your readers, because everyone has flaws, and some are more appealing to readers than others. Flaws and weaknesses keep your hero from being unrelatable. A perfect gal or guy is not a relatable character, and all good character just isn't very believable. And unbelievable characters keep readers from empathizing. It keeps them from caring. We talk a lot in this series about getting your readers to care about your characters. Um, they won't want to follow your character through 300 or so pages of your story if they're not relatable. So it's really important to make them feel human. So without flaws, your character is either flat and uninteresting or too good to be true. Either way, you won't capture your reader interest enough to care enough to learn the whole story. So, flaws and weaknesses in your character allow them to make mistakes and bad choices that lead to a compelling story. A protagonist who never makes mistakes, never gets scared, and doesn't misread a situation may end up relying on outside forces to drive the plot, and that is never good. We always want our protagonist to be driving the plot. And so, without those mistakes, that protagonist ends up reactive. They don't lead the story, and uh, protagonist who never makes mistakes never gets scared, and that protagonist doesn't lead the action. And so essentially, the readers aren't involved in what's going on with that protagonist. So, how do you go about choosing a flaw that fits with the story and your character? If your character can't cook and cooking isn't part of the story, that flaw doesn't matter. So your character's weaknesses need to fit in the story as well. They need to have some kind of impact on what's going to happen in your story. So you want to make sure when you're choosing flaws for your character, um, that their weaknesses drive their mistakes, and those mistakes are exactly what creates complications in your story. Um, so if it's, on the other hand, a significant dysfunctional flaw, will also drive away your reader, because big flaws can drive your story out of the plot. In other words, the character is so driven by this big flaw that in our case, instead of solving the mystery, they get sidetracked by their big flaw. So, in a mystery, your detective's main role is to solve that puzzle. And that challenge takes precedence over any flaw that debilitates your detective's action. Just like being too perfect, major dysfunction is too much. So you want to be somewhere in the middle with your flaws. But so character flaws make your reader worry about your hero, and that's why balance and picking those flaws for your character makes such a difference. You want to keep your reader guessing. That's a big part of our job as mystery writers. So balancing your hero's redeeming qualities with their weaknesses gives you choices about their next action in this story. Are they going to act from their redeeming qualities, or are they going to act from their weakness? And at the moment of choice, your character has the potential to make the right decision, but a flaw creates a high possibility for messing it up. So, here's some tips for choosing your flaws. When you understand your character, you use their personality to choose flaws that fit their character and the story, as I mentioned before. So they can have fears. Fear is a strong motivator and relatable for your reader. They also work in the story because fear flaws lead to mistakes, wrong decisions, and out of character behavior, and you'll have ample opportunity to add conflict. You've got that whole middle part of the story to build conflict, and so those fears are a great tool to use to build conflict. So, and also remember that fear can be rational, like a fear of snakes, or irrational, like a fear of clowns or dolls. So, your choice on how you want to make that work in your story and with your character. In a mystery, the fear does not need to be the thing your character must overcome to win, which is something that happens in other stories where your antagonist must overcome their flaw in order to um, achieve their goal. And in our case, the goal is solving the mystery. In fact, when details line up to overcome the fear, your story may feel too perfect by seeming convenient or worse, coincidental. So um, you can give your character a flaw like fear and use that in your story without having to make it part of the plot, as it were. In other words, they have to overcome that fear in order to solve the mystery. Instead, you can aim the fears that hinder your sleuth in their goal pursuit. So create conflict and cause trouble for your hero every time, say, they make a wrong they make a wrong decision, or they have a knee-jerk reaction because of their fear, and that can screw up the pursuit of their goal with and raise conflict. So as you work on your character background, you can ask some questions that reveal their fear. What past trauma may affect their behavior? What irrational fear will hinder their normal activity? Do they have a secret fear, one that nobody knows about or they don't share? All right. And what is their publicly known fear? And these are just some ideas for coming up with a fear for your character. What fears relate to the current problem? What's going on in your story, this particular story, where a fear might impact how your character acts? Um, is there a fear caused by the prop problem? Pro- Boy, I really can't talk today. A fear caused by the plot problem. In other words, is something required for them to actually go forward and solve the case, but they have a basic fear. So I'll just pick an example out of the air. So say that they have to go out in the desert in the western United States, and they're absolutely terrified of snakes, but snakes are out there in the desert, and is that going to keep them from actively going out there and pursuing their investigation? Um, or is there a fear drawn from internal conflict? We've talked about, their internal goals and their external goals. And There may be a fear that is hindering them from reaching an internal goal. So once you choose your character's fears, show them early in their story. So the reader knows they have this problem, all right? You- Um, because you're setting up your reader for situations where the fear can cause failure later in the novel. And your hero can overcompensate for mistakes made in fear and make some more mistakes. So you have plenty plenty of ammunition, as it were, to create conflict in your story with your protagonist's fears. Another weakness is personal prejudice. Cultural and family opinions ingrained since childhood are hard to shake, and your hero's attitudes and opinions can help her from clear understanding, especially when your sleuth encounters suspects. If they're culturally different, there may be some huge miscommunications and misunderstandings because ingrained opinions keep your character from acting in wise ways. So, preformed opinions start your character off on the wrong foot. And I know a while back I talked about giving your character opinions, and this is why it makes them really human. Both positive and negative stuff happens because of their opinions. And they can misread or mishear a suspect's statements or form a wrong impression of a victim just by learning the victim's background. And that leads them to ask the wrong questions of the suspects. So the suspect could be right there in front of them, and because your protagonist has these ingrained beliefs, um, they ask the wrong questions, or they don't follow up where they should follow up because they have a problem with understanding that suspect. So in this case, you want to consider your character's background, their culture, their family traditions, their schooling, all of these things to create those flawed opinions. Um, what did they learn to disapprove of or dislike as a child? Uh, what pushes their buttons? You really need to know what pushes their buttons. And what actions or beliefs do they believe are wrong? What do they believe in their core value system? What do they believe are wrong? And what are their intolerances? These can be little or big. It doesn't matter, those intolerances. And what will they fight for? What is something they're so committed about that they would actually fight for it? And what causes them shame? And what do they believe is bad? Just like what they believe is good, we want to know what they believe is bad, even if it's accepted in their current world. So their personal belief about something being bad may go against the cultural norm. So you can play off of those things and create more problems for your protagonist. Biases and opinions affect how your sleuth interacts in the world with other people, with the settings, and how they perceive the culture around them. So, good traits, let's talk about those for a minute. They can actually turn into flaws. For example, if your hero always does the right thing but is surrounded by people who don't, your hero is going to be blocked. They just don't go with what your protagonist is doing or believing. So if she's tenacious and encounters a situation that requires her to give up to win, she's going to be in trouble. In other words, if she has to give up and and she ten, tenacity is so ingrained in her personality. I mean, this is a good thing. We want a dogged detective who just doesn't give up. but on the other hand, it can cause problems. So think about those good traits as also causing problems as well. So force your hero or heroine to go against their nature. Um, and you'll add internal conflict to an external goal. And that's one of the things that readers really feel when your character has a personal belief system and yet doing the right thing, as it were, um, requires them to go against their internal beliefs. A great conflict. So study your character's good qualities and then ask what trait symbolizes your character's soul. What trait, good trait, symbolizes um, their core belief system? And then what positive trait could become a flaw and in what situation? This is just brainstorming ideas for what you can think about when you're trying to create conflict in your story. So, how can a positive trait cause as many problems as it solves? And what trait annoys other characters? It's a good one, too. And what positive trait actually holds back your character? So, turning good traits into flaws deepens your character and ties your reader to their problem. Your reader already understands their positive traits and now understands how the positive trait can lead your hero into a problem. So, overall, character weakness strengthens your story, and you build tension for the reader as they wonder how your hero will get out of a bad situation. Flaws and weaknesses lead your character astray, making decisions that lead to new complications or heading toward a challenge to their weakness or a misunderstanding or misjudging other characters. There's just so many ways that you can add conflict to your story just by focusing on your character's weaknesses. So, flaws are good for your character and help you create a good story. So, I hope that helps, and you can just, I encourage you to sit down and brainstorm some weaknesses for your character and also brainstorm how your character's good traits can lead them into trouble. I think that's one of the best ways that you can create conflict and create reader interest because as you introduce those good flaws and the weaknesses toward the beginning of the story, when situations come up that challenge those traits, you're generating character interest because they care about your character. Okay, I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, just post them in the comments, and I'll see you next week.